Final Fantasy IX is a turn-based JRPG released in 2000 on the PS1. There are other, more modern ports of the game, with changes made that I'll talk about later. However, I chose to play the original PS1 release. The first thing I want to start with, surprisingly, is the game's visuals. This game released late into the PS1's life. In fact, the PS2 had already been released just 4 months prior to this game's release. This game squeezes the most out of the PS1 hardware and also achieves beautiful imagery using some clever tricks. Most of the game uses pre-rendered environments for its backgrounds, and they are really detailed. What is really cool is when they add movement into the environments. To show cloud movement, a video is added to the foreground or background and it looks great. Other times, pre-rendered backgrounds will seamlessly transition into a video to convey things like an elevator rotating down a circular room, or to get a cinematic view of a new location. The downside of no fault to the game is that when you're playing this on a modern display, you'll see a ton of dithering. Dithering is a checkerboard pattern used so that when displayed on a standard definition display, it would blend colors together for more detail. The newer ports of the game up the resolution of the backgrounds, however, there is no additional quality control of these images, so they end up looking blurry compared to the redone HD character models. It's a shame, but there is no way to get the best out of the visuals unless you either mod the newer ports or play the original on a CRT television. Toshiyuki Itahana worked as a character designer for Crystal Chronicles and Chocobo's Dungeon before working on Final Fantasy IX, and the more chibi style of characters from Itahana's other designs are reflected in this game as well. This is a departure from the more realistic proportions of Final Fantasy VII and VIII's characters, and I think it's a point of contention for some people. I myself wasn't sure if I liked this direction, however the characters' personalities are conveyed so strongly through their designs, animations, and sometimes even sound. These characters are just as well crafted as any other Final Fantasy game. One of my favorite characters became Steiner, a knight equipped in a full suit of armor except for his exposed arms and legs. This gives him a dorky look, and fits his initial by-the-books mentality he has. This dorky perspective is reinforced by receiving playful insults and the nickname Rusty from Zidane, the game's main character. He is loyal to the Queen and serves his kingdom, not asking questions as it's not his place. He is sworn to fulfill his duties and will say that the Queen knows best. His armor also makes a clanking noise when moving, making his presence as loud as his beliefs when he's on screen. Another favorite character of mine is Vivi, a character that in the story struggles with identity, and it can be shown in his design. Vivi's design borrows a lot from the classic black mages of older Final Fantasy games, and his entire body is covered. Both of these things visualize a lack of identity. Most of his personality is expressed in his short height, shy reserved dialogue, and animations. These main characters come out of the gate with strong personalities, but are still given lots of room to grow and develop. They all reach a satisfying conclusion by the end of their journey because of their relationships, struggles, and environments. However, one character I did not feel this way about is Quina. Their motive for joining the group is to see the world and eat new food. While a friendship and bond is made with the other characters, their motivation for being involved is so jarring and different compared to everyone else's, and there really isn't any growth to be had. By the end of the game, Quina felt like they haven't changed. The game's intro segments do a really good job establishing the main characters in a great way. It starts with fantastic high moments with one party of characters, but also gives you space with another character to slow down and immerse you in the world. It has you play as Zidane, a charming and confident thief working with a group called Tantalus, sent to kidnap Princess Garnet. Almost immediately, you find the main characters interacting with each other in interesting ways. You find that Princess Garnet wanted to be kidnapped and escape from the castle with her own reasons. Steiner, not understanding the situation, does his best to stop the kidnapping, but instead gets brought along during it. While this is going on, you spend some time with Vivi as he wanders through the same town. The game gives you plenty of time to familiarize yourself with the battle mechanics in this section, as you combat Baku, the leader of Tantalus, in a safe space during the theater play. The story of this game is beautiful. It's one of the best parts of this game for me. It follows 8 main characters, and the different chapters will feature different characters. They are all themed around some sort of problem to overcome due to their experiences. Your active party will always be changing, keeping things fresh. You get to spend plenty of time with, and just as importantly, without different characters, making the dialogue varied and interesting. What the characters have to say about each other when they're not currently together goes a long way in showing how they really feel, and provides different perspectives. The active time event is very simple but a neat addition. It lets you view optional scenes that are happening at the same time, further fleshing out each party member even more. Final Fantasy IX features a turn-based active time battle system in which every character has a bar that builds up. Once the bar fills up all the way, they get to queue up an attack. This took a bit of learning at first. It seems self-explanatory, but the delay in when you input your attack and when it's executed is where the strategy comes from. Planning for both before and after an enemy attacks is important, and if you miscalculate the timing, you could fall behind in keeping your team healthy or dealing the right amount of damage. In the end, I like the active time battle system, as it forces you to get into a strategic rhythm and adjust accordingly to enemy attacks. There's a pseudo-easy mode in setting the battle type to wait. This stops the meter progression for all characters once a single bar has been filled, allowing you as much time as you need to make decisions. Abilities are tied to your equipment. Once gear with a desired ability is equipped, you have access to that ability. However, in order to keep the ability after swapping to new gear, you need to max the ability level. This system is really good for a couple of reasons. First, it values gear just beyond providing bigger numbers. You're incentivized to find or synthesize gear beyond what's sold at shops, because that rarer gear is bound to have better and unique abilities. Since you have a party of 4, each with their own levels and equipment levels, after almost every battle you'll earn a new level or equipment level for a character, making the rewards for battle constant. To speak toward the balancing of abilities and gear, I was pretty lazy when it came to collecting good gear, so I didn't get anything too special. However, I was still able to make it through the game without too much trouble, meaning these special rewards aren't necessary, but provide proper compensation for those willing to go out of their way to put in the extra work. Due to the nature of the story, your party never stays the same for too long. This, along with every character filling a unique role, each with their own abilities, kept combat fresh, as you'll always need to find a new strategy and always want to level up and use every character to make the most of them. The enemy designs in combat were all very unique. Very few designs were repeated, and every enemy fights in a unique and challenging way. This game's unique battle mechanic is Trance. Trance is a second bar below the action bar that slowly fills up when taking damage. Once the trance bar is filled, the character changes into a new temporary form, with enhanced stats and unique moves. The trance mechanic is hit or miss, with most of the times being a miss. You don't have any control when trance triggers, so you could be in any standard encounter that you have no issue beating, then it can trigger and make things even easier for you. On the other hand, if you either by chance or by manipulation get trance during a boss fight, you can do an absurd amount of damage, making the fight trivial. Late game can have you do 4 to 5 turns of 9,999 damage with just one character. The mechanic skews too wildly in either direction, making it either not helpful during easy fights, or too helpful during hard encounters. I would have liked to have seen more control and balance with the trance system. There was a short amount of time in the game where there was a difficulty spike. The first time you explore the game's overworld, you're without your white mage. The world opens up and enemies can put up a fight. Moving around the overworld on foot can be very slow, you might get lost, and the tough enemies left me with a few game over screens and it was a bit overwhelming. However, this area is where you'll find a new party member, and eventually a chocobo that makes traveling easier with a faster run speed and no random encounters. So exploration and a little grinding will put you over this difficulty hump. The game's overall difficulty was good. There were times where the encounter rate was high, but I never felt the need to grind unless I wanted to between major events. The game's overall difficulty was fair and the bosses were all unique and challenging. The biggest complaint in the original release of Final Fantasy IX is the battle intro. For every single battle in the game, once you trigger a fight, it takes about 15 seconds for the battle to load, and for the camera to cinematically pan around the area before you can fight. Earlier I said that this was a good looking game, but this is style over substance. 15 seconds adds up to a lot when battling and random encounters are a big part of your game. It wouldn't be a problem if there was a way to skip it, and thankfully the newer ports of the game allow you to skip the intro, but this remains a problem with the original. There was a lot of visual variety and the game's scale and overworld felt huge. You'll visit castle towns, some of them containing multiple districts, and royal towns each with their own unique feel. You spend a lot of time in these towns and revisit them multiple times. They feel alive and filled with things to do, making it all the more devastating when something happens to threaten the world's peace. Aside from the towns, all the dungeon or dungeon-like areas all have interesting visuals. I was blown away by how fleshed out the world felt, and it invested me in the plot. Things were always changing with more exploration to be had. The soundtrack was composed by Nobuo Uematsu, who worked on the majority of the Final Fantasy games. I enjoyed the soundtrack to Final Fantasy IX. It did a good job expressing the fantasy roots that this game's goal was to revisit. While there are a few tracks I can list that stand out to me, the one I want to focus on is Wicked Melody. That is the theme of one of the antagonists of the game. This character has a few themes that all include a leitmotif of a chorus of stomps and claps. This theme has such an imposing and oppressive feel that it stood out every time the character was on screen. Tetramaster is a prominent minigame featured in Final Fantasy IX. I actually found it pretty interesting and fun. Tetramaster is a grid-based card game. You'll collect cards throughout the game and can challenge NPCs to games for a chance to earn more cards. With 100 cards in total, I can see collecting cards and playing the game as a fun distraction from the main quest. However, if you don't like Tetramasters or just don't want to play it, there's only 3 matches required in the main quest, and you only need to win the first 2. There are also optional bosses and side quests. Final Fantasy IX was remastered and ported to mobile devices in 2016. This build is the base for all future releases. The remaster features HD movies that are now skippable, HD character models, an autosave feature, 7 game boosters including high speed and no encounter modes, and achievements. On top of these benefits, there is the ability to skip battle opening scenes, faster load times, and the base encounter rate is lower. I believe these benefits, along with having easy access on your desired platform, more than makes up for the blurry backgrounds that I talked about earlier. It's still a shame that the backgrounds fall behind in quality compared to the other visual upgrades. I would have liked to have seen some redone backgrounds, or even easier, AI upscaling the original images. This game's story and characters put a smile on my face from beginning to end. I even shed a few tears. I explored a vast world and was very invested. The gameplay was engaging and fun. It was a wonderful and satisfying experience throughout, and I'm glad I played it.